The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final webinar in the AMA series. Today, we will be talking about deliverability. Ken Quigley, our founder and president, will speak for the first 20 minutes, and then we'll have Billy Clark, who you've heard the other weeks, join us for the last 40 minutes. So with that, again, we'll do questions. Please put questions into the panel on the side. We will respond to them probably after Ken's session is finished. The first 20 minutes, we'll respond to those questions, and then we'll respond to Billy's questions during and after his presentation. Now, we want to remind you that Ken can show us the keystroke.ca website you can see on your screen. I just want to remind you that the recordings are all listed within 24 hours of the presentation. Ken, if you want to just scroll down to the training section.
Sure. Let me just actually bring up another one.
So if you go to keystroke.ca.
Okay, and then just scroll down. The bottom of the buttons, the very bottom of the buttons above my smiling face, you're going to see keystroke training videos. Click here. And every week we add the latest video to the bottom. So it starts from oldest to newest. So by tomorrow, you should see a new button here covering this. So these are all the ones that we've been doing this year.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. The other thing is, if you do have any questions or want some more information, you can email myself, Vic, V-I-C, at kqc.ca. So that's Vic at kqc.ca. And if it's questions about sales or quotes or just general questions, please feel free to put them through, and I will forward them to the appropriate people to respond. So with that, Ken, please start us off.
Excellent. Thanks, Vic. Hello, everyone. So earlier this week, I published a blog on distribution list hygiene, not just helpful, but essential. I thought it would be useful to kind of cover a lot of what we'll be discussing today. The main, and obviously the timing was coordinated with this webinar, but the main thing that I wanted to cover today as the lead off section was list maintenance, list hygiene. A lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of sole proprietors, what they'll do is they'll exercise a reactive approach to list maintenance. They respond to their contacts, their prospects, telling them that they've got a new email address, or they'll react to bounces. That's not a very efficient system, and there's a number of reasons why. If you were just sending out emails through merges or direct outlook, it's fairly passive, and you're not doing them in mass numbers, so the consequences are not that great. But the moment that you take a list like that and you engage something like Act Marketing Automation, you immediately say, hey, let's create a group of everyone that has an email address, and let's fire at them, say hello, and take a look at all my pretty emails. What can be the consequences of that? Well, high bounce rates have a lot of consequences. Simple things like mail server blacklisting, high junk filtering with a reduced sender reputation, or even blocks. You may find that you literally can't send some people emails. Spam traps, which Billy is going to get into a little later. But the biggest consequence, and why we as act vendors are discussing it today, is that if you take an unscrubbed list and you bring it into your use with AMA, you can actually end up finding your list either suspended, okay, through high bounce rates, and anything above 5% is considered a high bounce rate by most email service provider standards. But you can even find your account canceled if you don't, react to their requests and scrub your list to make sure that you can get your bounce rate back down below 5%. If you get your account canceled, it doesn't matter if you spend $948, $2,400, or $5,000, you will not get that money back. Okay, you are forfeiting it because they've gone through progressive discipline and you've ignored all of that. And they're accountable to their email service providers as well. And if the email service provider gets blacklisted, then that affects all subscribers to Act Marketing Automation. So they have to be firm and vigilant with offenders. Okay, so the question is, it's great that everyone has good intentions. Okay, and that I want to keep my bounce list, but but how? Because a lot of people, you know, their intentions will outstrip their capacity to fulfill them. So, you know, what tools are available now? We are going to be doing a demonstration on Optin Manager, which is a tool that, in my opinion, should be the first out of the box on any attempt to scrub your list. Because whenever you're scrubbing your list, there's two phases that you've got to go through in this order. The first is checking for validity. Okay, you've got to make sure that the emails that you're sending to are valid. And then the second one is consent. Okay, actually receiving consent from them, which naturally, if you get consent, automatically implies that the first stage, that the emails are valid, are also accurate. Okay, but consent gets really, really important. Now, it depends on you know, which border you're on the side of. Now, in the United States, CAN spam was introduced in 2003, and the rules for it are, you know, fairly light and you know, mostly speak about, you know, providing opt-out rules. So the CAN spam, you know, their rules can basically be broken down into 4 tenets. Don't use false or misleading header information. Don't use deceptive subject lines. Identify the message as an ad. Okay. Tell recipients where you're located. That's where you'll see the footer information is becoming pretty commonplace. Tell recipients how to opt out, getting to the point that I was mentioning, and then of receiving future emails, and then honor those opt-out requests. So, you know, that legislation has been on the books for 17 years. However, in Canada, in 2014, there was a new law introduced called Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation. And it actually was a dramatic shift of burden, where you no longer had to just simply provide people the ability to opt out. You actually had to receive permission from them that they opt in to receive your email. So it was a huge shift of burden. And then what we saw from 2014 to 2018, when GDPR came in, the GDPR had much of the same principles, but it extended it dramatically to privacy considerations. So for instance, when we introduced the Optin Manager, back then it was known as the Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation, or the product was called Act for Castle. What we would do is we built this tool so that when people you know, gave you their consent, okay, online, it would record the IP address from where they took it, so that you had that further authentication that it was in fact from them. GDPR took that as a privacy violation, and they actually prevented you from recording that information. Okay, so the laws have evolved dramatically since 2003, and what I can tell you is that over the next couple of years, you're going to see a tightening of CAN spam or even replacement legislation. So it's really good etiquette to implement these kinds of policies, and even if you weren't swayed by the etiquette component, it's also good. It's very self-serving in that you're going to have, you know, less risks associated with you know, account cancellations, and naturally a higher return when you've got a more finely tuned target market. So let's take a look at what that means. And I just want to kind of quickly cover this. Here's, you know, no need to take any notes or anything. Most of what I'll be covering today, aside from the demonstration, is covered in this blog. The Optin Manager is available for both web and Windows, so you can install it inside of Act, or you can install it to work with a hosted database without even Act locally installed. But I just wanted to also bring your attention to the additional resources at the bottom, since we are covering deliverability. So you've got additional resources, best practices for inbox placement. Billy will be covering a little bit about this, expectations for email behavior, and a really good article on how to ramp up. Now, what I like is, even though this is a very, very conservative approach, so you're not just throwing your entire list at AMA, is that it's, you know, this particular product, the Optin Manager, is a powerful way of doing a lot of that. So let's actually see how that works. So I'm going to do a demonstration with the Optin Manager inside of Act. So here we have a single contact. Now the two fields that we are going to work with are email status, and as you can see, Castle. Okay, so up here you can see the Optin Manager. Now the first thing, as I said, there's no point in trying to seek consent from people until you verify that they're what their email address is. So the first thing we want to do is we want to verify what the email address is, and what we have done is we've built integration. I'm just going to bring this on over here. Built integration into a service called Bright Verify. Okay, and Bright Verify, there's a number of different resources available, but Bright Verify is one of the leading services on the internet for email verification. Now, if you didn't want to use an integration, then you would have to export your entire list to Excel, upload it to them, have them massage it, send it back to you, and then you would have to import it back into your database, hoping that no duplicates or data was overwritten. Okay, what we've done is we've actually provided a direct API integration so that you don't even have to leave your Active database in order to do a poll. Okay, so the first thing to understand is our integration into Bright Verify is free of charge. Okay, so it's, or I should say more specifically, there's no extra charge for it. It's part of the subscription of the Optin Manager. However, using their service, obviously we can't get them to just write us a blank check. So you actually have to subscribe and get an API key from them. The cost is very negligible. It's literally less than 1 penny per contact. So you can do a list, a couple of thousand in size that isn't going to cost you that much. Okay, certainly in terms of the repercussions of not scrubbing a list. Okay, so with that covered, I'm going to show you how easy it is. Okay, so we've got the email status field. So the first thing I want to do, and I'm only going to do one at a time, okay, is I'm going to click on Optin Manager, and I'm going to click on List Verification, and I'm going to say Verify using Bright Verify. Okay, now then you've got the option of using your current contact, which is what we're going to do, your current lookup, or all contacts. Obviously, I don't recommend using all contacts, okay, because one, you wouldn't necessarily have email addresses for everyone, but you want to make sure that it's a more filtered and reasonable list because you're going to be paying for all the checks against it. Now, when they do that check, I'm just going to run it against Zdana's here right now. Okay, actually, let me just go through it. I've already tested on hers. Okay, so here, go here, Optin Manager, verification. Okay, so you can see here the reason it didn't, because I'd already got this this checked. Okay, so now I'm just going to click on View, refresh, and you can see that it automatically updated it as valid. Now, doing one at a time obviously isn't going to create any great efficiencies, but if you do them hundreds, thousands at a time, then that's going to create massive efficiencies in terms of time, because as you notice, I didn't have to type anything. Now let's quickly take a look at the email status options. You have accept all. Accept all basically means that the account, that domain, has a wildcard where it's basically anything at keystroke.ca will be accepted. Invalid is self-evident, it's an invalid email. Unknown means that they weren't able to determine that, and valid means precisely that. Okay, so now we've determined that Zdana's email is accurate. Now we want to get her consent. So normally we'd say generate an email. Okay, and this is where the template editor comes up, and you can very quickly just edit this and edit here. This little accept or deny, okay, is what will be in there, and what it looks very plain. And by the way, we keep all of the text in the Optin Manager as text. We don't permit any HTML, because the higher the HTML content, the more likely it's going to be flagged. If this doesn't hit anyone's inbox, then it doesn't serve any purposes. Okay, but then you click on email, and you've got again the option to click on current contact, the current contact lookup, or all contacts. What I'm going to do is I'm actually, instead of sending the email, imagine if someone said, I didn't get that link. Can you generate it for me and send me a link so I can accept? I'm going to say generate unique link. Okay, and it's going to copy it to the clipboard. Okay, and now I'm going to go back here, and I'm actually just going to paste in that link. Now this is exactly the link that the that hyperlink in the email included. Okay, so you automatically go to this screen. You can see that I've dressed it up with our corporate logo. You can have opt in, opt out, or accept, deny. All of this is customizable in the background. I'm not going to get into that so much. And then all of this wording here is customizable as well. Okay, the point is that you want to make this as quick and clean and as clear so people know how to opt in and just move on. So in this case, I'm going to click on opt in. Okay, and now this result is saved on the server. Okay, So what happens is the Optin Manager can be configured to either do a list check, whenever you request, or you can actually schedule it to do it, every day, every few hours, whichever. Obviously, the frequency is going to be based on, if you're running any campaigns to harvest consents. So right now, because I'm not running any, I'm just going to click on Update manually. And remember, this is the field that will be updated. Okay, and as you can see, this was automatically updated here. Okay, no refresh required. So what's happened is we've got an email verification, okay, and we've got Castle. So now I have just with this one list. Now imagine that I was doing this to a group of hundreds or thousands. It really doesn't take any more to do hundreds or thousands than it does to take one. But now what I would do is I would create a new group, okay, and anyone that I wanted to, email, okay, just as a base group, I'm going to say marketing group, and I'm going to say here, edit, okay, so this is a dynamic group, and I'm going to say email status, okay, I'm actually going to say equal to, because it's got valid and invalid, and I don't want it to pick up valid if I just put contains, okay? And then I'm going to put in the contact permission, accepted, okay? And I do a preview, okay? And I can immediately see I've got 1,800 here, okay? So these two things, now I've got a group that if I market with this group or I use this as a base for any future marketing, and then I filter it down further by, let's say, their interest in a particular product or industry that they're in or regional segmentation, all of those things would come after these two, filtering conditions. So, this would be my base group, and then everything gets narrowed after that. So now my expectation is that if I market to this group, I'm going to have a very, very high, high open rate, very low bounce rate, and likely a very low opt-out rate as well, because these people have already provided me permission. Now, what's really nice about this is we're not relying on any third-party services. There's two really nice things. We're not relying on any third-party services. So the problem is when you are using your email service providers, those suppressions, those opt-outs are all recorded on the server, okay? So on their side. So you don't necessarily have an immediate record of that, and you're not able to see immediately on the screen that those people have opted out, okay? The second thing is when it's on yours, you can provide you can do ongoing maintenance. So let's say that you've done a campaign, you repeat it for a first couple of months, and you've got this dynamic group. And as people opt in, that group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You have to maintain that list. You have to constantly be, rinsing and repeating over and over again, because most people don't populate their database and then stop adding to it. So in order to catch people that, as they're being added to the database, going through the same thing, you should be running this for the first few months, okay, rather rigorously, and then at least, every couple of months after that to make sure that you either catch up with the stragglers that didn't respond previously, or you catch up with the people that you've added to your database. So you're creating a really, well scrubbed list, because the email hygiene part is absolutely critical. But we all know that if you rely on manual, like if you have a reactive approach, that requires human intervention each and every single time, and it just won't get done. Even with the best of intentions, it will start off really good, but then it will just fade over time, and your list will again be subject to things like spam traps and bounces and things like that that put your account in jeopardy. Okay, so I am at 3:19. I've managed to cover what I wanted to do almost exactly on time, so I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Yes, if we just receive a client's email directly from the client, can we just go ahead and change the email status to valid? Would that be a good practice?
It's a very bad practice, because what we're talking about is the distinction between implied versus explicit. Implied permission is like if someone gives you, it's the old business card test. If someone gives you your business card, or they've completed a form on their site or whatever, there's a time limit. Okay, depending on what country you're in, the rules, but there's a time limit to how long implied permission is in effect. If someone completes a form like this and actively opts in, and you've got a record of that consent, then that's explicit permission, and in most countries that has a much longer duration. So them just calling up and saying, Groovy, send me emails, I don't recommend it. Follow through on a process like this.
All right, thank you. Why not include one sentence that describes your business on the opt-in request?
Interesting. If you actually talk about your business in the initial email, remember that this email that you're sending out through the opt-in manager is not subject to a lot of the anti-spam legislations, right? Because it is an active attempt to solicit permission. But the moment you start promoting your business then it's going to be perceived as a wolf in sheep's clothing. If you say, please provide me opt-in permission so that I can send you emails. Oh, and by the way, our sale on Act ends today. That's perceived as advertising. And then the actual consent requests would get subject to whatever anti-spam legislation your country has.
Excellent, thank you. Is SwiftPage the AMA ESP or a different company?
AMA is the service. Billy can talk a little bit more authoritatively on that, but they actually have a separate email service provider, which is why they have to be vigilant, right? Because they are a customer as well. So they have to protect the integrity of the service for their customers' benefit, as well. They have to show due diligence to their email service provider.
Excellent. The last question before we go to Billy, are you actually sending an email to the contact to get their opt-in?
Yes, and that's why it is so important that it contain literally nothing other than the request. Okay, so if you send out an email to them, there's literally been no recorded cases that I've ever heard of, and I've been involved in anti-spam software literally since 2014. And we've sold thousands of licenses. And in fact, SwiftPage throughout the UK, okay, they did not have a programmatic solution. So SwiftPage in the UK resold our opt-in manager throughout Europe, okay, when the GDPR was introduced. So we've sold thousands of licenses of these. So we're pretty familiar with the different legislations. So this is why you really want to keep it very, very simple, because you will not be perceived as in violation if it's just a consent request.
Okay, one more question popped up here. Does the opt-in feature actually increase your sender score ID, decrease spam likelihood, etc.?
I'm going to let Billy cover that, but the opt-in manager scrubs your list. Okay, so the scoring actually represents more of the nature of the responses. Okay, so this is stuff that how people are reacting to your email. Let's just say that follows the scrubbing, because obviously people can't react to the email unless they receive it. And our practices are to create as high a receive rate as possible. And
the second part, is it mainly to have the record and be ethical? No, Jacob, it's legislation. It's not a matter of being ethical.
Yeah, and it's also verified, right? Because the one thing that you are always at risk at, because people have, especially, you remember in the GDPR days when this was introduced, everyone was asking for permission, and a lot of end users probably consented 50 to 100 times. So if you get a complaint, you want to have verifiable proof, and going into Act, looking up that contact, checking the history, and seeing the exact date and time, and having that stamp of when they provided it, it will protect you. Because remember, in Canada, the Canadian anti-spam legislation afforded end users the ability to sue companies. They didn't just rely on the government to enforce it. They actually empowered the end users to sue them for up to $10 million per case. So yeah, you want it in your history.
All right, thank you, Ken. We're switching over to Billy now. Billy, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay, you are now a presenter.
All right, you should see my Act screen here in a moment.
We do.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Marketing automation, April 16th.
We're going to sit on the screen for a couple minutes because I do kind of want to elaborate a little bit on some of the points that Ken made specifically around permission. Because, I mean, really, the first and most important part of sending a marketing campaign to someone is, of course, having their email. I've recently, like this last week, this is the second time that I've seen Optin Manager working, and I really appreciate that the software is there, but because it does hit the 4 major points that you need to have on explicit permission. Your permission must be freely given. You cannot hard option someone into giving permission for it, and you cannot tell them unsubscribing to my list will have a negative consequence on your account. You can't do that. That's the first biggest no. And even here in the United States with the Can Spam Act, it literally says you can spam, but you have to still allow people to remove that permission at any point. They can withdraw their permission to receive emails for marketing purposes. Your consent needs to be specific. You do want to tell recipients why you want their email address, that you're going to be marketing to them, that it's informed so that that permission is very clear and distinct. You're not hiding it behind another window or things like that. And that gets into ambiguousness. You want to be unambiguous with all things. So saying like, well, this person never said they didn't want to get marketing from me, that's a huge red flag. And that's one of the things that you can start to look for with termination of your account or suspension of your account. So permission is the second most important part, but it's the first most important part, because if you have an email address and you don't have permission, you have nothing. So I strongly suggest that you consider Optin Manager, or make sure that your lists, your emails that you're picking up are from informed customers that you've talked to recently. A lot of times when you get a new service, especially with a marketing service, an email marketing service, the first thing you think of is, well, I've got a bunch of emails and this thing takes emails, so let's just add them all in and fire them off. And then you get a letter from the Deliverability or abuse department saying, hey, you bounced 40% of your emails because you've been emailing people you haven't talked to in 15 years. So very important things that need to happen is with that permission. So thank you, Ken, for showing off Optin Manager. I strongly suggest you guys go for that. Part of what I want to talk about today is not just, sure, of course, we've drilled permission into your brains at this point, but I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about the technical stack. I'm going to try to keep it as layman as I can so that you guys can understand a couple of additional ways to kind of make sure that your emails get into those inboxes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about best practices. Now, Ken's blog links to the standard best practices for inbox placement and lead generation. It's a very good document. It goes over everything that I just spoke about. It also talks to you a little bit about your emails themselves. So you want to target your clients. Sending an email out to 300,000 people may sound like an attractive way to convert that into a lead and make money off of it, but it's really not, unless those 300,000 people are your exact target demographic or the people that you do want to actually include on that marketing. And there's usually a lot of process involved in making sure that that's the case. And that process is a ramp-up procedure. Well, the blog that he mentioned actually links to this, and the SwiftPage help knowledge base has links to these. If you look up best practices, you'll or even just marketing automation, emails, or inbox, you can pretty much find links to all of these. But there's if you go on the web though and you try to search for, and I actually did this earlier today, I went on the web to search for best email practices in regards to subject lines or what content should I put in my email? How do I deliver this? And I wanted to look at it from a user's perspective. If they didn't have a guiding hand on this, to see how does my mail get into that inbox properly? And what I found was nobody has the right answer. They don't have wrong answers, but nobody has one concise answer on it. Right now, for a subject line. I don't know if you guys have noticed or have looked at your email lately. Literally every company I have ever given my email address to has sent me a message talking about the coronavirus, COVID-19. Many of these are ending up in my junk folder automatically because at this point, that is a relevant hot spam topic. So let's probably consider looking at current trends. If you're receiving a lot of emails on a controversial topic, there's more likely for people to start hitting spam or complaining for those emails, and you're going to start seeing those emails taper off because different mail services are starting to just naturally toss it into a junk folder so that nobody is the wiser that you received all of these emails. So the same thing goes for anything you find on the internet about subject lines. It is a nebulous topic and it changes. But if your subject line doesn't plainly describe what's in the email, then you've probably done it wrong. Don't get me wrong, I understand that there's a level of call to action that you try to have in a subject line. In some cases, people talking about sales have often been junk, like put into a junk folder years ago. That is no longer the case. So searching online for just subject line information, you'll find that 90% of the English lexicon can be found in a don't use this word list somewhere. The basic thing for you to remember is keep your subject lines simple and relevant to the topic, and people are more than likely going to click your email. Unsubscribing, though, you'll notice that in all AMA templates, here, let's actually look at the template that we made together in previous webinars. The very bottom of them, and Ken kind of touched on this, we require that you have your full company name right here, your company address, the copyright year, and an unsubscribe link on those. And if that's not at the bottom of your email, and they force it by using merge tags, if this is not here, you can't even start the campaign in the first place. So add in your merge tags and make sure you have your unsubscribe. But having the unsubscribe is only half of it. As an AMA subscriber, you do have the ability of looking at your unsubscribe list, your suppression list, and seeing who's unsubscribed, and you can literally hit the little X next to it and resubscribe them to your emails. Now, I'm only showing you that just so you understand that that capability is there, not that I suspect that you should go in there and start unsubscribing people. When someone wants to opt back in and you have consent to do so in the form of an email from them, that's the best way to do it. Even if they call you on the phone and say, hey, I don't get your emails anymore, and you look in here and you find out they unsubscribe, say, hey, do me a favor, send me an email, say you want to resubscribe, because then you're covered under just about every country's law there that says, yeah, the user can sue you. In Canada for up to $10 million. That's a new thing I learned today. I didn't realize it was that high. So those unsubscribes, sure, you can resubscribe them, but just make sure that you actually have continued consent to do this. Objectionable content, even if they have said, yes, I want your emails, even if they're paying for your emails in some way, if you've covered all of your bases, but your email is full of objectionable content, that may stop inbox placement. Spam filters and junk filters, they look for certain types of content, and if it doesn't necessarily, match what that company wants to have in their inboxes, they're allowed to put them into a junk folder or never deliver them at all. Most companies just mark it as junk. And when I say companies, I also mean public email domains, AOL.com, Gmail, for instance. Those, they'll toss them over into their spam folder and you'll never see them. So avoid objectionable content if at all possible, depending on what your business is. These are things that can stop an email from just getting to the inbox, even if your campaign statistics say it was delivered. And then unengaged recipients. Like I said, don't send an email out to someone you haven't talked to in 15 years, but I'm talking at most 6 months. Don't send an email to someone if you haven't had positive email correspondence with this person in the last 6 months. Email addresses change, they move. If you start sending out a blast to people over 6 months, the chance that that is going to bounce is higher, and the higher the bounce percentage the faster your account can get flagged by the abuse team at SwiftPage. They want 5% and under for all bounces, primarily hard bounces, but if they start seeing it for soft bounces as well, they'll start investigating. But if you keep it at 5%, then you're going to be okay. Complaints are a totally different monster. When you receive an email from Gmail and you click, and you didn't want it, and you click that "this is spam" button, that is a complaint. That gets fired off as a complaint. It gets sent back to the ESP. The ESP flags it as a complaint. The ESP immediately suppresses that email from receiving, that email address from receiving any further emails from you, and it negatively marks your account. A complaint is like a maximum complaint you can have is one complaint out of every 1,000 emails. If you just think about how many emails you've received this month, I mean, that kind of puts things in perspective. I've received thousands of them, and if I honestly, if I went through and I started complaining on a bunch of them, I might actually start getting people flagged. If you're wanting to send out 300,000 emails, that's a very, especially if it's to a bunch of people you haven't spoken to in a long time, unengaged recipients, the odds of them clicking complain or spam or block are so much higher. And if you go over that 1%, that is an immediate flag by the Deliverability and Abuse Department at SwiftPage, and they'll be in contact with you. I strongly suggest, if you haven't already whitelisted that, the email address they'll send from is deliverability.abuse@swiftpage.com. Make sure that you're not filtering that. Add it into your contacts just to make sure that you get that email. A lot of times that email gets to you, nobody reads it. If you don't read it and you don't respond to it, they'll send you another notice. If you don't read it and you don't respond to it, they'll suspend your account to get your attention. And then you'll call up and you'll be mad because you can't send out your messages. And then if you have role accounts, like sales@keystroke.ca, for instance, is a role account because there's nobody named Sales that works here. Sales is a role that we give to a group of people. It's an internal distribution list, or it's a mailbox that's manned by multiple people. You don't really want to use role accounts. You're usually not going to get a lead based off of a role account. You're going to get a lead sending it to a person who actually makes decisions. You want to get a hold of that decision maker in the company. That's the best way to convert them over. If you're sending out to sales or service or support at or managers at, those types of email addresses, they don't work. I strongly suggest that you skip those. So in short, if that email is something you want or that they want and that they expect to see, especially if you use Optin Manager and you said, yes, please send me stuff, then they're going to look at that email. There's a much higher chance they're going to look at that email. And if they open the email, that's going to cause a positive click for you. You're going to get them on your website. They're going to start seeing your services, and they're going to move forward. Now, there's an additional step of this, and this is authentication, which I'm going to get into next. But before I do that, I'd like to open up the floor if there's any questions in the chat right now, Vic.
No questions right now.
Perfect. That means I've talked about, yeah.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to add. I didn't want to interrupt earlier, but I touched upon spam traps earlier. One of the things that I found is that if you use, rollover accounts like what you talked, Sales at Keystroke, like that, and you haven't had any kind of interaction with them in years, the likelihood or the percentage of chance of that being a spam trap becomes very, very high. So just be mindful of that. That's one of the other things. If you've got, if you haven't made contact or had any interaction with an email account in years, and it's a rollover account, the chances of it being a spam trap are much higher. And when you hit a spam trap, you can often trigger a blacklisting immediately.
Yeah.
There's no escalation. It's almost immediate.
That's a really good point. A recycled spam trap is exactly what it is. It's an old email address that somebody has converted over into a method of collecting spam. And then those immediately get complained to the ESP that was sending it. And we're all in this together when it comes to AMA. When you're sending out emails, even though it says it's coming from your domain, you're you're affecting my account as well. And whenever I send out a bunch of spam email, I'm affecting your account. So it's really important that the abuse department of SwiftPage stays on top of these. And the best way to do that is to make sure that the relationship we have with AMA clients is an informed one as well. So you guys know good practices, you follow them, and we all get our emails in everyone's inboxes.
Okay, a couple of questions, Billy. What is the SwiftPage email to whitelist?
You won't necessarily, oh, it's deliverability.abuse@swiftpage.com.
All right.
That's the best way, because that's where they're going to come from. There may be some other ones that they're starting to use. I did get a strange one the other day from them from a different address. So you may want to check over the knowledge base over at ACT and keep an eye on that. And then I'm going to try to put a lot of this into an extended blog post. And so if that changes, I'll make sure that that's there as well.
All right, excellent. Is there some other authority beyond SwiftPage who's enforcing these rules? And then MailChimp does not do this.
So yes, there is an ESP that SwiftPage uses who, what they do is they, the only thing that they're really enforcing are the complaints for emails that get complained back, or specifically something we're going to cover a little bit later, which is hard bounces. The ESP does automatically stop hard bounces from going through. And I'll explain a little bit about the difference between hard and soft bounces in an attempt to not bore you to death on that subject, but it's an important one for you to know.
All right, and who is the ESP for AMA?
So as you guys know, I recently left SwiftPage. When I was there, I was informed not to tell anyone who the ESP was. Since I've moved to Keystroke, I have not gotten a confirmation on whether or not I'm allowed to say who that is. So for now, I'm going to ask you to contact SwiftPage to request that information.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's it for now.
Perfect. A ramp-up procedure, a little bit of a ramp-up procedure, what I did want to mention was start small. If you have 100,000 contacts in your database, that's a huge database. It's actually, I mean, it's pretty big. Don't send out to half of them. Don't send out to 10,000 of them. Start small. And the reason for that is if you start with a small amount of data, first off, you're not going to get blacklisted because you're going with your more recent contacts, people you've talked to in like the last couple of months, maybe 500 people, and then you send them out an email and you start getting responses back into your mail campaign. When you start looking at, actually here, I'll show you the email statistics, you're going to see, people who have received your email. If anybody complained, thankfully nobody complained. You're going to see who opened your emails, whose unique opens. This is engagement, and engagement is how you laser focus on which one of your clients are, they're relevant to your business, first off. And if they're engaging in your emails, then you know that in the future, there's a good chance they're going to continue to engage. So starting off small and then maybe doubling it to 1,000 of the next one, maybe 1,500 after that. Do it in small chunks. You do two things when you do this. You not only you're getting this data, but you're secondarily, you're increasing your sender reputation through AMA. If I send it out to, say, 100,000 people, the entirety of my database, and 50% of those bounce, I'm going to get an angry email. I'm going to get a message saying that I have blacklisted us on a website, which sure, they may be able to resolve that very quickly, but you're the problem at that point, and you don't want to be the problem. Or if if they've contacted you back and you didn't care and you kept doing it and you kept bouncing, they'll suspend your account, and then they'll try to work with you to make sure everything's good. And if they reactivate the account, you do it again and again, you're going to lose that investment. And if you spent a lot of money on AMA, they're not going to refund you anyway. So ramp up slow, get that sender reputation going good. And then you may find by the time you've hit, a few hundred of your emails out of a campaign or two, you may find a new path to go, new relevant data, part of your approach for your inbound message flow that you didn't really think of.
All right. Quick question here. Is there a way to have people opt in without Optin Manager if we don't have this tool? For example, filling out a landing page? The answer is yes, but then it's manual going through. Optin Manager for the price. Oh, go ahead, Billy.
You're totally right, Vic.
Yeah.
You can do that. You can send out emails on your own. I suggest you don't try to send out and hey, opt into this through AMA because you're going to have a bunch of negative emails anyway where you've bounced a bunch of emails. So send it out through your own system. Put a landing page together and link to it in an email because you can still link to landing pages in personal emails through Outlook, or put it on your website and then see if you can get some inbound traffic that way. You totally can.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. There's absolutely no problem in attacking this on several fronts. Web forms and things like that tend to be a lot more passive and involve much smaller numbers. To Billy's point, though, when you're sending out emails using AMA, you're kind of building up your bounce rate before you have a chance to reduce your bounce rate. So you really don't want to use that as the canary in the cave. You want to use your own mail server to kind of determine what's valid, what's invalid, before you start using a very expensive service and risk the account status.
Good point, definitely. Today, every single day, but specifically today, I got a request from someone that says, listen, I have explicit permission from everyone on my list. And I sent out a campaign yesterday, and I'm getting messages and phone calls saying my email ended up in the junk folder. And we look at the email and there's no objectionable content. The subject line clearly depicts what's in the message. The message has all of those factors in there. What happened? Because some people are getting it and some people aren't. I got a couple of images I'm going to show you here. Please excuse my Photoshop skills. So I want to talk to you about authentication. So when you send an email, it goes through a system on most mail servers, and we'll get to that too, called DMARC. And what DMARC stands for is nothing you need to remember. But DMARC is full of two other acronyms. One is SPF and one is DKIM. You also don't necessarily need to remember what those mean, but please feel free to look them up. Basically, what these are authentication for AMA to send on your domain's behalf. With many servers, they don't care, but some of them, and we'll get into some of the ones that specifically do, they require this system. So there's several parts to inbox deliverability. So I want to go to. So first, of course, is this amazing template that we've made. The next part is your domain name, and because we're going to be sending through that. The third part is the recipient email server, and the last is whether or not it gets past the junk filter and into that inbox. Okay. So here's each one of the sections: the template domain, the recipient server, and of course their inbox. So when we send an email through AMA, we're actually sending it as if we are sending it from your domain. Now, the word for that is spoofing, and that word has a negative connotation to it. So I want to clear that up. We're only spoofing a part of the email. We are explicitly telling these servers that we are a service. So they aren't going to be mad that we're spoofing necessarily. So your average email server from a small company who's not hosting it through like a larger public system like Outlook.com or Office 365, they're going to say, cool, here's your email, and it's going to arrive in the inbox. And that's it. When you sign up for the AMA account, this is the system that is currently in place. It is a hopeful, hey, we're sending as these guys, is that cool? And hopefully the server just doesn't care. So this system alone has a pretty good deliverability rate, but there's better. Now, each server follows specific rules. So we're going to just really quick run through all of the rules. There are none. Every single server is configured its own way by its own IT guy, and he may decide to change the rules on you at the last minute, and there's no way for you as a sender to tell, and rightly, you probably shouldn't care. Your email should just arrive in the inbox, right? Well, many servers, talking about the differences in them, like they have different authentication types. Like maybe they only want SPF. Maybe they only allow for DKIM. Maybe if SPF fails, they go to DKIM, or vice versa, which is the more common way. Even the response sent from that recipient server that you can view in your email statistics can be different from server to server. There are no rules on that. There's just guidelines, and they don't necessarily follow them. They're very, even though they're kind of strict guidelines, they're very loosely followed. Public domains like Gmail, AOL.com, they are always fighting this uphill fight against spam. And so they are much less forgiving in regards to someone sending on your behalf. So in the previous example, when we send to AOL.com, AOL says, no, I'm not accepting this email. And I'm going to respond with a bounce code, and it's going to be a pretty harsh one. It's going to look like it's a spam block, but it's literally just saying, no, we're not accepting this email. And bounce codes themselves, so a bounce code looks like, it'll say like 550, and then probably a sub number on that. And then it'll have a long description on what that is. And then further down in the description, there may be a different bounce code. And that's the one that we actually adhere to, not the first one. So there are often many bounce codes involved with them. And I'm going to try to touch on hard and soft bounces here before we leave. But I want to talk to you about this authentication and I'm going to explain to you how you get this authentication. But on one of these public domains, they literally ask us for a password. And by default, since we don't have one, who has it? Does AMA have it? They don't, because we set it up without one. So we actually have to go through a process to create a password, and you have to put that password on your domain as a specific record. So now the server says, hey, AMA, what's the password? We give them the password, and then the recipient server checks the domain to see if that password matches. And when they do, you have email deliverability. That's in the inbox, almost guaranteed, as long as you don't hit any of the other things in regards like bad subject lines. When it comes to bounce codes, I want to touch on hard and soft bounces and why they're called that. A hard bounce is, for the purposes of AMA, a spam rejection. You have been rejected from sending from your domain because of a spam complaint against your specific domain, or because of a policy that's on the mail server. Some government websites or some government email servers do not accept email from smaller private domains. So it is a hard bounce, and the ESP will stop that email from being sent in the future. In fact, if you look over earlier on when we were in the administrative section, under the suppression list, there's entire email domains that are suppressed. These are suppressed by the ESP. You can't see them here, but when you are sending your campaign, for instance, when you look in your logs, you will see a section for suppressed domains. Those are suppressed by the ESP. We enforce that suppression. We do not allow emails to go out to them, and that's expected. A soft bounce, though, it can literally be that email doesn't exist. And you would think that would be a hard pass on an email, but all that means is the email doesn't exist today. Tomorrow, that email may exist. Someone else may sign up for that email. So we don't want to tell you never to send an email here, but you should probably look at your list. So that's the biggest difference between a hard and a soft bounce. Almost all of the bounces you will see will be soft bounces if you have explicit permission and have verified those emails. They're going to be temporary failures. The mail server is not accepting any email right now because we're busy. The mailbox is full, come back later, because that does happen. Situations like that are temporary, so therefore they are soft. Let's say you send a bunch of emails, though, and you do get a letter back about your account. The most important thing I need you to do is, if you receive a letter from the Deliverability or Abuse Department at SwiftPage, is to read it. It will tell you exactly why you got hit. It'll tell you the exact reasons that their system flagged it initially for them to investigate, because they don't just automatically send an email. They look into it first, and then they send you a personalized email. Read it. If you have questions, contact support. If you have support through keystroke, they'll direct it over to me. We'll talk it through, and I'll work with the abuse team, or if we absolutely have to. If you have SwiftPage support, contact them and say, hey, there's something wrong. But respond to that email, because those are the guys that actually know what's going down with your account. The last subject that I kind of want to talk about is For inbox placement, that's only half of this. I know we talked about deliverability from a technical standpoint. We talked about deliverability from the authentication, from the explicit permission, but let's talk about engagement, because you want to keep that engagement number high. The average time that someone looks at an email is 15 to 20 seconds. That is kind of a report that's gone out. I've done a lot of research trying to figure out the exact timing, and almost all of them say 15 to 20 seconds. The average time that a human being can look at something and decide whether or not that thing is pretty is under 3 seconds. When they open your email, think of that 3 seconds. Think of them saying, like, I want to stay in this email. I want to commit my 15 seconds minimum of my average statistic to your email. If you have paragraphs of text in there, if you have a very confusing layout of those emails, they may not want to receive those anymore. So their consent that you just really worked, your tail feathers off to get, if they're just not getting high quality emails in, they're gonna eventually unsubscribe. So make sure that not only your subject lines are good, but your content is well thought out and has a good layout to it. And there are a couple of other tips in regards to even some of the templates that come baked into AMA. They have animated images in them. Those don't actually play in most web browsers, or in most mail clients, I should say. In Outlook, they don't show at all. So it'll just take the first part of that sequence, and if that's not a good looking part of the sequence, well, you started off with kind of a bad email from the get-go. I'm not sure at this point about Gmail. I had some animated images work fine in my Gmail account, and one of my Gmail accounts, I should say, but not the other. So I don't know if there's something specific about the emails that were sent. But keep in mind, have someone who understands how to direct someone through an email visually, and that creates the proper call to actions. We're blessed with a gentleman named Carlos here who is able to do that. Most of the images, like the images in the blog that you saw earlier of the envelope taking a bath, was made by him. That's an engaging image that keeps people looking at it and gets them through that content properly. We're right almost at time. I'm going to go ahead and stop and get to questions if there are any.
Yeah, there's why would contacts agree to opt in using Optin Manager? If they have an interest or if you have a relationship. I mean, that's something that's out of the control of the Optin Manager. So if you do have a relationship with a client, or if they're interested in what you have, they would agree. Is it okay to embed links to news articles, white papers, etc.?
Oh yeah, as long as especially if they're something you control, if they're on your website, for instance, and it's all the same domain, that's usually the best way to go. Any emails that have excessive links to random sites can often be flagged, but it's a really low chance for that to happen. So as long as they're all reputable sites, you shouldn't have a problem.
All right, there's what happens when I get an email like this, non-reply -dmark support@google.com.
Okay, that's specifically, you need to get a DKIM key generated, and to generate that, you can either contact me or you can contact SwiftPage directly and request the key. That is that password that we spoke of in my slides, and it's you'll have to contact your domain registrar to add the password onto your domain, and then once you're done with that, you can immediately send back to that email that said that, and it will deliver.
All right, thank you. Is a hard bounce excluded from further sending, i.e. the email in the suppression list?
A true hard bounce is automatically suppressed by the ESP for the future, and there is no method for you to unsubscribe that link. It'll always be suppressed.
All right. Is there a service that will rate your subject line?
I haven't actually looked for one. Considering how subject lines change so often, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a service out there, but I don't know of any. Ken, do you know of any?
I would think that it's just a general marketing service. I've never heard of one, and it's hard to imagine anyone making money off of it. So it would be included as part of other marketing services that they're providing.
All right. Thank you very much, Ken and Billy. Great webinar. I want to remind everybody that you can watch the recording if you go to keystroke.ca, scroll down to the training videos. You'll also see our other upcoming webinars. We're changing the format this next month. We'll have one the second Thursday, and then we're also going to have a open house type of a thing, open questions. Ken, sorry?
It's a town hall. We'll have a town hall.
Town hall the third Thursday of the next 2 months as well. So you will get those emails, but please go to our website, keystroke.ca, and check them out under the training section. So thank you very much. That's it for the webinar. Be sure to look for the recording within 24 hours.